Welcome back to the Santasa video learning series. In this lesson, we'll be discussing the low-code transform process, or how to add a transform node to your workflow or data pipeline. The objectives for this lesson include how to add the low-code transform process node to your existing workflow, how to enable interactive mode, how to configure a transform process node, how to preview the outcome or output table, how to modify a transform process to add a new field, how to edit that transform process to modify an existing field. And one caveat, this training assumes that the lesson one, create my first app, has been processed and successfully completed. So let's get started. What we will need to do is click on our application created from the first lesson from the home page, and you'll notice that we have this S3 connection that we connected to our loader and have output of our extracted file. So the first thing that we're going to do now is to again enable our interactive mode. And from the previous lesson, you should have an existing cluster still configured. If you do, all you simply need to do is click on the box next to the runtime and then click Start to turn that cluster back on or start it back up again. If you don't have that listed, you're going to have to go through the steps that we had done in the previous lesson, where we would add a runtime, give it a name, select the training runtime from the runtime template section, and then click the add button to get to this point. And again, we're still working with that same file. So we're just going to have that single file that we're loading from 6/2/2016 in the from and to field. And again, we're going to use drop and replace because we're going to, make changes to this transformation node a couple of times. So we're going to want to drop that data and recreate it. So we'll save that as drop and replace mode. And again, now that we're waiting for this to spin up, we can go ahead and click on the X in the upper corner and get that out of our way. The next thing we're going to want to do now is add that transformation node to our existing workflow or pipeline. So remember when we spoke in the last video, you can anywhere in the white space scroll in and out to manipulate your existing node, or you can click and hold and drag it around on the screen. This really makes it easy to position the layout and is the visual aesthetics. It just looks good to do that. So we'll kind of move this over because we're going to add a new node. So we want to kind of give ourselves some room to work with on the workspace here. Again, in the upper menu, we're going to click on the little lock to unlock the workspace. Again, you'll see now that we've got the save, so we know we're in edit mode in the little pencil. So now on the left-hand side, we're going to go into the process section and look for our transform node. Once we get down there and find that, we'll again click, hold, drag, drop, and release. And again, you can maneuver each of these nodes independently if you want to lay it out any different. I'm just putting it this way just to let you see what it looks like in this format. But again, now we are taking the output from our output table and we're connecting it to the input of our transform. So here's our flow. We've got data coming from the S3 bucket into our load file loader, where we are decoding those Apache logs. The output table, and you remember we had that output table with the data in a nice clean format now. We're using that table, the output from that table, as the input now to this transform node. And the transform node is going to allow us to make changes, add data fields, extract data from the fields. A number of different things can be done from this section. So now we will go ahead and click on that white transform node to open up the configuration screen. And again, if you go to the middle of the configuration, the double arrows, click on it, it will expand it to full screen. Again, just giving you room to work with. We will again go through the left-hand menu, run history. Because this is a new node, there is no history. Again, validations in the status. At least one table view or something is required as the input. We got that. That's the table from our loader file. And previous node must be configured, which it is, or we wouldn't be able to connect it. So we're good to go with our status. Again, with notes, you can add a note if you feel like adding a note to allow discussion of, what did you transform, and then save that, and then you can have the other team members add comments, or you can continue to add notes as you go through your configuration process. Next thing we'll do is go down in the configuration section. Again, general is where we can give it a nice understandable name instead of just transform. So maybe this is we're going to transform the from loader. Maybe that's a good name to give. We'll just do that. Next, we'll click on join on the left-hand menu. There's a couple of things here that we're going to talk about with join. This section is used to add enhancement data or lookup files, or to join other tables into your transform node. If you need to blend some data, you can do that in this position. It's not required for this lesson, so we're not going to actually add a join. The primary source, this is that table that we connected to, our transform node. And the alias section, we're going to change the name to just give it a little more meaning, or maybe shorten the name down a little bit, just so it's easier to understand in our workflow. But we're just going to use the word alias as our loader as our alias in this particular instance. If you click on the join icon there, the green plus, you'll notice that there's a couple of different things that can be done in this particular section. But we will be doing this in another video, discussing all the different join types and values and everything that can be done within the join. But for now, we're just going to click on the red minus icon and not add any joins. The next section we'll move on to is mapping. So click on mapping in the left-hand side. This is the section where we're actually going to define the data inputs and give labels for the schema. If you want to change the names of the fields and stuff like that, all that can be done within this transform node. So the first thing we'll look at here is the type. So the default is simple, and we're just going to leave it as simple. That's our default. The other option is aggregation, and that'll be covered in a separate video, but this would give you the ability to do some group bys and stuff like that. We're not going to get into in this video. Is partitioned is defaulted to on, and we want that on right now because we do have a partition that we're working with. And you'll notice that because it is turned on, we've got event partition added as an element to our schema. Windowing option, just leave that off for now. It's going to be, again, covered in a separate training video. But this provides the ability to look back a specific number of days in data to a specific date and grab elements of that look back window and write it to this particular partition. And there will be a video dedicated to that. So the next thing we're going to want to do is add our elements of data from the loader table into our transform. And to do that, we're just going to, on the upper menu here, click on the Add All button. We click that, and you'll notice that it is populated with all the fields from our loader table, and you'll notice that they're all prepended in the function column with our alias name. So loader dot field name. The other elements in the upper section of the menu here will be covered in a follow-on video. We're just going to worry about this particular add all and then the add button. You'll notice here that there is an errors exist icon that is red since we added that data. So if you click on this section, it will expand this validation, and we'll notice that it says at least one column must be identified as the identification or an identifier or a key or something in the data that is a unique identifier, and we haven't defined one yet. So what we'll need to do is we're going to use this user ID field as our identifier or our key. So what you're going to want to do is go over to the identifier column, and where the word no is, you're going to click there on no, and it's going to bring up this radio button, and you're going to click in the box to give it a green check and hit enter, and you'll notice it turns yes. Our validation turns green, no errors, so we can close that section by simply clicking on that again. And so that that validation is complete. So at this point, the loader is ready to go, but we want to add a new field to this data. We want to add an additional field. So we're going to click the add button. And for training purposes, we're going to extract a piece of data from within the user ID field and create a new field out of it. So we're going to just grab the user ID field and apply. And what you'll notice is the user ID field has been added to the bottom of the schema right above the file date, which is our partition field. And so the scenario that we're going to talk about here, there is within the user ID field this is the PKI information that is being captured in the Apache log for the user. We've got mock users authenticating to a mock website, and they're using a mock PKI certificate to authenticate themselves. So we are going to extract from that full PKI just the CN value of the field. And let's see if I can just see if I can bring this up and show you what I'm talking about here. So this user ID field, you'll notice it's got all this information about the user that we want to extract some information from. And you'll notice if you don't save things before you move on, you will make a mess of what you've done. So I'm going to quickly go through here and add this information back in. It's a good recap to see what I'm doing. Again, add all, so we can add all our information here. Our error about the identifier, so we're going to go back in and find our user ID field and create that as the identifier. And it's yes. Then we're going to add our new field. Remember, this is from that user ID field. So we're going to add that field back in here. So now that we've added that field, we actually need to add the field or do a manipulation of this element where we're going to invoke the function editor. And you do that simply by clicking on the field under the function area, and you'll see the little FX button here. Click that, and that opens up the function editor. In this scenario, we're going to use a split function. because of that. And again, I'm gonna show you what that field that we're working with looks like. And I'm just going to kind of paste it in here so you can kind of reference that field again. This is that information we're trying to extract, and we want to grab this piece of that element out of there. So you can use this menu section here to scroll down and look for specific functions, or start typing and find your specific function. Then you can scroll down and look for your field, or start typing your field in there and find it. There are some additional configuration parameters associated with Split that you have to understand. And again, these are all available on Google or something like that. You can search any of those functions within Google. So Split requires that you have to have a field to consider, which that's what this is. We're looking at the user ID field. Then you need to tell it what you're going to split on. So we're splitting on that comma. So we're taking the user ID, splitting on the comma, and we want to take the first element before the first comma. So we're going to take the 0 element of that first split, and that is our split code to extract that. So we'll go ahead and click apply, and you'll notice that inside our function where we now see that new function. Instead of just the field, we've got our new defined function. And you'll still see that we have some errors existing here, and name must be unique. Well, remember, when we created this field, we just copied the user ID field into this section. So this name, user ID, is the same as this name, user ID. So we need to give this a new name, and we're actually doing a different function. So we should probably give it a unique name. So I'm going to give this a user_cn, hit enter. And now here's my new field name. My validations are good. My names are unique now, no errors. I can close that up. And so now the mapping section is configured. We've got a new field defined in our mapping, and we can move forward. The next section is filters. This is where any required filters can be enabled. It's not going to be utilized for the training that we're doing right now, but we can talk through it just briefly. If you click on the filter tab here, you'll notice that you can bring up the basic filter editor, where you can apply an appropriate left value or custom function, an appropriate operator. There's a number of different operator types. Right value, you can have a function or another field. So think of a scenario where you've got maybe you've got keep alive code being sent every couple of seconds on your website. Is it alive, or is it a heartbeat or something like that? So your logs are filled with a bunch of activity that is not really analytically significant, but it is filling your logs. You may want to filter that out, where you have your URL matches a heartbeat or something like that. You want to remove those, or you can use the code version where you can just write that code out if you know how to write the code in a SQL-like where clause. But we're not using that for this, so I'm going to turn that off and go down to the next section, which is output. And so output, this is where we're going to define, again, the name of the output table. And again, it's pre-populated with an output ending. And you should name it something that's easier to understand with your workflow. So something like maybe transform, since that's what we're doing is a transform here. Let's call this output a transform output. So there gives it a nice unique name. Configurations in this section simply talk about how the partition is going to be created and the file format that it's going to create. These defaults are fine. You don't have to make any adjustments. Just leave them as they are. Also, the location within the Vault Store where the table is going to be created is listed as well. There's also an option that we're not going to use right now that is for in memory. And this is used if you have a step or a node or a process that can run, and writing that table out to a Hive directory is not needed. It can just be stored in memory and then used as the input of a next step. As long as that is a viable option, you can invoke the in memory. But for now, we're just going to leave in memory off, leave everything else as the default. And that's all we need for now. So we're going to go ahead and click the green check on the upper right, and you'll notice our transform node is in the nice light green color, meaning that it's ready to go. And we can click the save and lock as we've done before and save the configuration. And you'll notice now we're in this locked screen function, ready to run this job. And again, processing this node is the same as we did in the last exercise, where we're going to hold down the shift key and click on the transform node, which again is going to just select that node, and we'll click run in the upper right. Again, our job is executing, and in the activity section, we can expand that and see we've got another job running. And this job again is running on our active cluster for this particular date range that is still defined in our configuration section. And this activity node again is going to run. And like we did before, you may have to scroll out or zoom in or slide the nodes left or right if you're interested in watching the status change as the configuration runs. Again, what we're waiting for now is for this node to change to white with the dashed ring around it, which is going to indicate to us that the processing has started. And you'll see that that has happened right now. So now those configurations that we set up in this node are being run, where we have added that split function as a new field, an additional field that wasn't part of the original data. So now we'll just wait for the job to finish running and processing this one data. Remember, this is just a small data section, so the processing time shouldn't take too long. And once that finishes, we're waiting for that node to turn dark green, which will indicate to us that the process is complete. Once again, if the node does turn red, that will indicate that there's an error within the job and that something has failed. And again, you could click on this icon right here to open the log file to see exactly what's happened. But that's not necessary for us. We've got a nice green check mark. Our dark green node has completed. And we can go ahead and close the activity section and go back to our node here. Okay, so now we've got this process completed. We can click on the output table node. And again, we'll see in the details section, we've got information about this table, what the name is, what database it's in, and some other information about the table. Schema, again, is going to show all those elements that we've created in our mapping section to include our new field of user CN here. The state file, again, will show which file we did our processing on, and all the other information, count and size. And preview will again show us the data that has been extracted or transformed from this in this regard. And so we're going to scroll to the end to see the user CN field. We've got a new field here, and it looks sort of right, but not quite right. We've got of the name value pair, we've got the name portion still showing, and the value is really the section that we want. So that just means we need to go back through our editing process and modify the split to remove that unnecessary element. So what do we need to do a modification to this table? Remember, again, we come up to the top, click the unlock so we can unlock and get into edit mode. You'll see that we're in edit mode when the save button is indicated. We're going to click on that transform node to open up the configuration editor, the double arrows to get full screen, go to the mapping section. And what we're going to do now in this particular instance is do a split of a split, just for ease of this training scenario. We're going to do it that way. There are a number of ways that this could be done. We're just going to show this one option. So remember now our scenario here is we've got CN equals and then the username that we're looking for, that user CN. And we want to grab this piece of this field that's been created here. So in order to do that, we're going to have to add another split. So we're going to split, and the first split is giving us this piece. And then from that first piece, we're going to split on the equal sign. And now we're going to take the element after the equal sign. So we want to grab this piece. So now let's apply this. You'll notice in here the function now shows this new function that we've added. We can go ahead and click our button there. We've got light green now because we've made a change to the configuration. We need to save and lock it again. And now we need to shift click, and then we're going to run this one more time. And you'll notice we've got the execution run parameter happening here. One thing I will tell you that you can also do, instead of shift click to select something, you can also right click on the node, and it will automatically select it and give you the run option all in one go. So there's two ways to do that. And the shift click is going to become important when we start processing multiple nodes, and we'll talk about that in a future video. So in this instance, we've got our next job running. The transform loader is getting ready to process, and there it starts. We're now white with the dashed lines around it, meaning our process node is running on our cluster. We're just waiting for it to do the necessary functions. Remember, now we've got the split of a split occurring in this section. If there was something wrong with our configuration, again, we would be looking to see if this icon turned red. And if it was red, we would be able to open the log section here, and which would give us indications of what was happening, where the error may have occurred, and what we would need to look for to correct that error. But in this case, it's not necessary. We're still waiting for our process to complete. Once it completes, we're going to want to reevaluate our output, and there it goes. So we'll go ahead and close this up. Now let's reevaluate the output, and we're going to go to our preview section. We're going to scroll over to that CN field we're looking at, and voila, we've got just the element we're looking for with the name value pair. We've just got the value. The name section has been pulled out, and this is the output we were looking for with our scenario. So now we can close this section. We can turn off our interactive mode. We're finished with this portion of the training. To get back to the home screen, again, you'll click on the upper left, click the back button, back to the home screen, and we're completed with this lesson, ready to move on to the next.